van. This is what we're fighting for today. One of the main reasons I believe that we should be voting for this constitutional amendment will be waiting for me this evening at our kitchen table to tell me about his first week in school. As much as some want to say this is about politics, this vote today is about people. It's about standing strong for people who are under assault by an authoritarian who's coming for our jugular. All we have now, the only choice is to fight. This is a cynical ploy, and it's just the start. First, they come for the districts. Then they come for your ballots. Next, it will be your family. Today's vote is about the future. It's about fairness. It's about trusting voters. I will respectfully ask for an aye vote, and I yield my time to Senator Cabaldon.
Senator Cabaldon, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. This bill, this package of bills has been among the three most heavily reported bills in California and in the country. The notion
Cabaldon,
that...
Can you address the presiding officer, please?
Oh, for a point?
Can you address the presiding officer, please?
I usually stand there. Okay. All right. Thank you, Madam President. This package of bills has been among the most heavily reported. It's widely known across the state of California that this effort is underway, which is odd because when I talk to my own constituents and I mentioned the word redistricting, a glazed look goes over their eye. Very few Californians spend their time or their worries or their concerns or their hopes thinking about redistricting. They are thinking about food on the table and rent and public safety and their ability to walk free on the streets of this state. But I hear about it constantly in my own district. And I hear about it in places that you might not expect. And it reminds me of one of my favorite parts of the year, and I know I share this with many of my colleagues from both parties, Little League opening day. The parade goes down the neighborhood on Meadow Road, turns the corner. We all end up at Memorial Park for the first day of the Little League season. And once the ceremony is over, the certificates have been presented, then the teams go onto the field. And you sit, for me as a mayor, now as a senator, you sit with the parents ready to watch the game. And the first inning comes up, and the other team keeps striking out. And the second inning, they've struck out every time. When they pitch, sometimes they intentionally hit our players, and you're starting to get a little worried. By the fifth inning, though, something weird happens. You see that on their side of on the other team's players, the first base is now being taken over by one of the dads. One of the moms is subbed in at second base. Another mom's at shortstop. Another dad is at third base, and another at catcher. And you look at the field, you say, this is not fair. This is Little League. Where are the kids at? You can't just sub in 5 adults to play a Little League game. That's not fair. It's also not safe. What you've created is a Little League I've never been a part of. We don't sit in the stands in that moment and argue with each other. You know what I'm going to do about this? I'm going to go to the next Little League board meeting in 2 months to complain, because what we really need is a policy that prevents this from happening. You don't pen a harshly worded letter to the other team. You stand up. You do something. In that moment, most likely, what most Americans would do, we're sending 5 of our parents out there. We're pulling our kids off the field. We are taking action to assure that that cheating, that endangerment does not happen. If when the Olympics are at the Rose Bowl here in California, the Rose Bowl in California, and the soccer team come on the field and we're playing against Russia, and they sub in 5 people, 5 additional players onto their team, you can be damn right we'll be calling for our team to be doing the same. We won't be waiting to file a complaint after the game is over that we lost because someone cheated right in front of our eyes, right in broad daylight. That's why Californians every day, more and more Californians are like, I don't know that much about redistricting, but this ain't right. This cannot happen, and California cannot stand for it. That's what this is all about. And so what's different here is it's not a trophy that's on the line. What is on the line is everything that we've heard described by the pro tem and others on this floor. The HR1 cuts, the massive cuts that will hit California, but many of them that won't take place until after the congressional election. So we have a shot to stop them from happening. What's on the line is our freedom on the street and the terrorism that's happening with ICE, the attacks on UCLA, on our very elections, on reproductive freedom. Across the board, we have a chance to do something about it. Because right now, everyone at the Little League game is always asking me, what can I do as an American? What can I do to prevent the erasure of our democracy, the decline of our institutions and our protections? Now, and so we have to both fix the rules. We do have to go to that Little League meeting, and that's exactly what ACA 8 does. Its first provision is California calls upon the Congress of the United States to place a constitutional amendment before all of the states for a national independent redistricting system. That is number one in ACA 8. And so we are doing that. And we must also get on the field and protect our kids and our families and our communities. Now, it's ironic because we stand here today 99 years after the very first redistricting initiative went on the ballot here in California. Redistricting is one of the most contested ballot initiatives over and over and over again that Californians typically face. And we've been doing it now for for a century. And that ballot measure, which created an independent citizens commission to redistricting, was rejected almost 2-1. When it was proposed again a decade and a half later, it was rejected by 10 points. It was rejected and rejected and rejected and rejected and rejected. In the 1980s, it was rejected 4 times. 4 times. In the 2000s, it was rejected right before it barely passed. And so when we talk about the voters have enshrined this in the Constitution as something that can never change, the voters have been changing their minds about redistricting almost since the admission of this state into the Union. And in fact, in 2008, when the voters passed the initiative that the senator from Fair Oaks noted, there were 2 other ballot measures on that 2008 ballot that are noteworthy here. One was the voters' overwhelming support for high-speed rail, which we've heard previously on this floor, senators from the other side of the aisle, Republican senators saying we should toss that out. We should throw that one out. But this one that passed by less is somehow divinely inspired and can never be changed by the voters themselves. The second measure that was on that ballot was Proposition 8, the infamous Proposition 8, which said that we were amending the Constitution to prevent folks from marrying the person that they loved, marriage equality. That's what happened in 2008, by a larger margin than this commission. And yet, last year, the voters of California overwhelmingly reversed that decision. Democracy is in ever-changing progress. It's a book that we are writing together. And the only ones that can tell us to respect the will of the voters are the voters. And the only way we can know what their will is in this critical time for the preservation of our democracy is by passing this Constitution to let the voters decide. I want to speak briefly to the notion of this mid-decade redistricting that we've heard about repeatedly this morning as well, and the outrage over the idea that we might do redistricting in the middle of the decade, as though this were the first time this idea has been considered. Republicans and their agents submitted mid-decade redistricting initiatives nearly every single year in the 1980s, and then again in the 90s and in the 2000s. The outrage, the hypocritical outrage here is palpable. The only folks who proposed mid-decade redistricting before today have been the Republicans of California. So the outrage that this is unconstitutional, how can it be unconstitutional to ask the voters of California if they choose to, if they decide to, if they elect to amend the Constitution to accomplish this? And also, Texas did not consider the 2020 census data or any updates. In fact, the chairman of the elections committee in Texas said, oh, well, I don't have that census data. I haven't looked at it. This process, on the other hand, has examined every available data source, the census from 2020 and all the data since, all of the testimony in relevant areas in California where the lines are changing to look to see what did regular people say about their communities of interest to the Redistricting Commission. And then finally, the notion that this is expensive. Another example of fake outrage, because we heard no outrage about the costs, the annual petitions to the Secretary of State for a recall of the governor or someone else. Every single year, we've had these petitions submitted with zero, dead silence about the cost of that election, which is exactly the same as the cost as this. So please spare me the sanctimony about the cost of the election when you've remained silent every single time that another recall election has been proposed. Now, I also represent Sonoma County, just as a response to the senator from Santa Clarita, and many other communities that have constantly been shifted from district to district over time. And Sonoma County will be doing just fine under this map. I can speak to my constituents. We can handle having 3 members of Congress. It's a feature, not a bug. But let's not think that today's redistricting map, it comes from a commission that did outstanding work, but it's not from some divine text, right? Let's go up to one of the closest districts from here. Maybe stop in Citrus Heights at the Jolly Cone, and just head up the freeway. You've now met about 5% of the voters in this congressional district. Head up the Highway 50 a little bit. You'll end up in Folsom, maybe stop at the auto malls or maybe the Old Town. Then head over to Roseville and to Rockland and Placer County. You've now met half the voters, over half the voters of this district. But you got to keep on going, because in that district, you got to keep driving on Highway 80 up all the way to almost Mount Lassen. And then you have to turn around, get back on the freeway, get back on 12 freeways in order to get to Death Valley. Death Valley. So please don't tell me about splitting Lodi, which is a fan community of mine just nearby here, in 3, when the current map places all hundreds of thousands of people in Sacramento County, steps away from this building, in the same congressional district as Death Valley itself. And so these maps represent a step forward for representation. They respect communities of interest. They fully comply with the Voting Rights Act. But most importantly, they meet the moment that we are here because of Trump, and we're here because of President Trump, and we're here because of what Texas is doing, seeking to cheat and steal the game. We are doing this not in response to Texas alone, but to parry Texas, to neutralize and to nullify their illegal actions to cheat this congressional election and undo the will of the voters in 2026. California, we are the 4th largest economy. We are the most populous state in the country. It is our duty to America to be the last line of defense. And I ask for an aye vote on ACA. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Senator Valladares, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. And I do believe I have amendments at the desk.
Secretary, please read the amendments.
Amendments by Senator Valladares, set 1.
You may proceed.
Thank you. Members, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, I rise to present important amendments to ACA 8. If this body insists on moving forward with stripping power away from the voter-approved Redistricting Commission, then the very least that we can do is we owe Californians meaningful safeguards against corruption. This amendment simply provides that any legislator who votes yes on ACA 8 will be prohibited from running for elected office for 10 years. That is not a radical idea. It merely extends to members of this legislature the same 10-year moratorium that already applies to the citizen volunteers who serve on the Independent Redistricting Commission. The people of California demanded ironclad guarantees that those who draw district lines never place personal ambition above the voters. If this is good enough for the citizens who volunteer their time, it should be good enough for politicians seeking to reclaim power. Let's be clear. You cannot demand that ordinary citizens give up the right to run for office for a decade and then exempt politicians from the same rule. That would be hypocrisy. If you truly believe that ACA 8 is about fairness, if you truly believe that this isn't about creating career opportunities for members of this body or those who influence these maps, then you should have no problem supporting this amendment. Because if everything is above board here, then what do you have to object to? 60% of Californians voted to give redistricting power to an independent commission because they were tired of tortured lines drawn to serve those in power. The current process is transparent, it's independent, and it's accountable to the people. They said clearly, we do not want politicians drawing their own lines. Today, this body risks turning its back on that mandate. But if we're going to press forward, then we must at least bind ourselves to the same ethical standards that we demand of our citizens. This amendment is a test of whether or not this body values integrity over expediency, fairness over partisanship, and accountability over ambition. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you. Senator Gonzalez, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam President and members. Again, ACA 8 is very clear. It's in response to what colleagues in Texas are doing, and this is absolutely egregious. I'm wondering where the outcry is against the Texas officials that are continuously disenfranchising voters in Texas. And it also requests...
Excuse me. Point of order.
If the majority leader could please speak to the germaneness of the amendments.
Your point is well taken. Can you please limit your comments to the amendments that we are hearing at this moment?
Yes, and I am absolutely going to do that. And so ACA 8 also represents a reasonable and rational response to this overreach. And the amendments specifically, what I will say is I would love an outcry for the fact that there is going to be, if we're going to talk about corruption and transparency, why aren't we talking about the fact that President Trump has already said he wanted to run for a third term and become the next king of the United States of America. So I will ask that.
Excuse me, just a moment. What is your point of order?
The speaker is not addressing the amendments directly before us in this body. I believe the amendments have nothing written about the President of the United States. So.
Thank you. Just a moment, please.
Yeah.
Senator Gonzalez, the amendments that we have before us are dealing with whether or not the members of the legislature will be able to run as a candidate for 10 years. Your comments must stick to the amendments that we are voting on or that have been presenting before us. Thank you.
I think the floor
Senator Valladares, would you like to respond?
Thank you. Again, to clarify, this is a really simple amendment. It is 3 lines. This is about fairness. This is about holding ourselves, elected members of a legislature, to the same standards that we require of our Citizen Redistricting Commission. Again, if this ACA is to really be about fairness, then you should have no problem supporting this amendment.
Thank you. Senator Gonzalez, you are recognized.
Madam President, I ask that we lay the amendments on the table, asking for an aye vote.
Senator Gonzalez has requested that we lay the amendments on the table. This is not debatable. Senator Gonzalez is asking for an aye vote. Senator Valladares is asking for a no vote. Secretary, please call the roll.
Allen. Aye. Alvarado Gil. Archuleta. Aye. Adeguin. Aye. Ashby. Aye. Becker. Aye. Blakespear. Aye. Cabaldon. Aye. Caballero. Aye. Cervantes. Aye. Choi. No. Cortese. Aye. Daly. No. Durazo. Aye. Gonzalez. Aye. Grayson. Aye. Grove. No. Hurtado. Aye. Jones. No. Laird. Aye. Limon. Aye. McGuire. Aye. McNerney. Aye. Menjivar. Aye. Nilo. No. Ochoa Bog. No. Padilla. Aye. Perez. Aye. Reyes. Aye. Richardson. Aye. Rubio. Aye. Cigarto. No. Smallwood Cuevas. Aye. Stern. Aye. Strickland. No. Umberg. Aye. Valadares. No. Wahab. Aye. Weber Pearson. Aye. Weiner. Aye.
Ayes 30, noes 9. The amendments are laid at the table. We will continue our debate. Senator Weiner, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Colleagues, this is really about California punching back against Donald Trump. Donald Trump has been punching down at everyone for a long time, punching down at states, punching down at trans kids, punching down at immigrants. We are punching back to protect our democracy against this fascism. This is about California checking Donald Trump. And I wanted to say with respect to Trump, there was some reference to corruption before. I hope if people are going to talk about corruption, we can talk about the corruption in the White House, that Donald Trump is accepting all sorts of bribes, these scam meme coins that people use to funnel cash to him, the plane that he received from the Qatari government, the bribe that he received from Paramount to settle that bogus defamation lawsuit. So let's talk about that corruption. And we're seeing corruption here as well in terms of Donald Trump trying to seize control of our government in perpetuity. And that's what's happening in Texas and what we are responding to. So when I say that California is checking Donald Trump, it's because not that many institutions are actually stepping up to check this aspiring dictator. The Republicans in Congress are not checking him. They just give him whatever the heck he asks for. The Republicans in Congress voted to kick their own constituents off of health care and food assistance and to close hospitals in their own district at the request of Donald Trump. The Supreme Court is not checking him. The Supreme Court basically rubber stamps whatever the heck Donald Trump wants to do, whether it's illegally deport immigrants or tear down the government illegally. The Supreme Court just rubber stamps it. It's not red states because Donald Trump called up the governor of Texas and said, hey, I want 5 more seats in Congress. Can you do a scam redistricting? And instead of saying, you know what, Mr. President, like mind your own business, we're going to handle our own stuff here in Texas, the governor of Texas just said, yes, sir. Whatever you want, sir. We'll do whatever you need, sir. Universities aren't doing it. They're caving in one after the other, adopting his MAGA policies. Most recently, even Harvard, which it was so depressing. Harvard was standing up, and then even Harvard caved in. It's not the media. Some media are standing up, like the AP, which is still banned from a lot of things because it refuses to say the Gulf of America. But other media are even paying bribes to this president. So California is not going to do that. We are going to check this fascist's overreaches. We're going to check him. We're not going to back down. We are the 4th largest economy in the world. We are the largest state by far. We have the wherewithal to be able to fight back and punch back against this despicable human being who is trying to tear down so much of what is good in this country. And Trump knows that we have the ability to punch back and that we will punch back. And that's why he is targeting California so severely, why he is demanding $1 billion in extortion from UCLA. Otherwise, he'll kill off Alzheimer's and cancer research at UCLA. He's doing it by targeting, especially Southern California, with these horrific immigration raids, grabbing people from their front yards and from bus stops and from work sites and disappearing them.
Just a moment.
Point of order.
Just a moment. What is your point of order?
I deeply respect my colleague from San Francisco and his passion about a lot of different issues throughout the state of California, but I would encourage this body to talk about the bill that's before us. And I gave a lot of leeway before my point of order, but it seems like it's going into a lot of different issues. And I would hope
Thank you so
that
much,
my-
Senator Strickland. You've stated your point of order. Just a moment.
Madam President, it's directly relevant.
Thank you so much for waiting. We have allowed during this debate for people to give outside context on both sides to their arguments for whether or not they support or oppose the measure that is before us, and therefore your point is not well taken. Senator Weiner, you may continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam President. In addition to targeting UCLA, in addition to these horrific fascist secret police immigration raids, he is directly targeting California with his unconstitutional plan to upend the census and to do a new scam census so that he can move even more seats out of California and other states that don't support his fascism. So on so many levels, he is targeting California, and he is targeting so much that is good about this country, and California is not going to take it sitting down. We are going to punch back, and that's what we are doing today. I want to just say one final thing. I supported the creation of the Independent Redistricting Commission. I have been an admirer of the work of this commission. And I understand that there are some folks, people I know and respect, who want us to keep the Independent Redistricting Commission, and we are keeping it. But we also have to be clear that this is about so much more than whether we are taking a particular approach to redistricting. That all becomes irrelevant if we lose our democracy because we have a fascist who freezes himself in power and continues to tear down people's access to health care and destroy civil rights for so many communities and destroy our ability to engage in scientific research.
Senator Weiner, let's
Yes.
go back to the bill before us.
Yes. And so it is about the bill, it's about the Independent Redistricting Commission. And so as much as we all want to have the best redistricting possible, this is the right approach right now in response to what Texas is doing and what this president is trying to do to our country. And I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you. Senator Reyes, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. My mother has often told me, and I'll say it in Spanish, si es injusto, es incorrecto. Y si es incorrecto, es tu responsabilidad de corregirlo. No porque te afecta a ti, porque le afecta a la sociedad. My mother says if it is unjust, it is incorrect. And if it is incorrect, it is your responsibility to correct it. Not because it affects you, but because it affects others and because it affects society. The actions of this administration have terrorized our communities. Sometimes it is direct, and sometimes it is not only direct in our districts, but also throughout California. In San Bernardino County alone, 155,000 children rely on SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Many of them are going to lose this. That is an injustice. We are seeing armed, masked men stopping and kidnapping people right off the street, putting them in unmarked cars and sending them to unknown countries. Just last week, we had a young man who was stopped by these masked armed men. He wouldn't roll down his window. He asked them to identify themselves, asked for a warrant. They could not provide anything. They broke his windows. He immediately fled. They fired at his vehicle. And on his way home, he called 911 and asked San Bernardino PD to please come and help. We've lost due process, which is a fundamental right of Americans. We have lost it under this administration. The fear in our countries is unacceptable, especially for our children who are no longer going to school. We have superintendents now concerned in sending the teachers out to welcome the students, to make sure the students feel that they are protected in their schools. This Trump big, ugly bill has taken $1 trillion that was for Medicaid. In every one of our counties, every one of our districts, our people, our constituents are losing their benefits. And who benefited under that big, ugly bill? Billionaires. They can write off their jets now under this bill, in addition to so many other things. Because of the president's failure, he went to Texas, has been talked about. He went to Republican states to do what failures do best when they don't get their way. Cheat. Found a way to cheat. He's cheating because he knows that he will have to fairly answer to the consequences of his actions, and to the American people who will wholeheartedly reject him. This is why we're here on the floor, to hold him and others accountable, and to show that when you pick a fight with California, California will fight back. It's been mentioned so many times, we didn't start this fight, but we cannot back away from it. Extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures. That is why we are doing this the right way. We are taking this fight to the voters to ask them to join us in offsetting the partisan, hostile acts of the Trump administration. If California truly leads the nation, as is often said on this floor, then it has to be us that shows the rest of the country democracy is what is at stake. We are witnessing injustices under this president and this administration. These injustices are incorrect, and we have a responsibility to correct what is wrong. If it is unjust, it is incorrect. We are here to protect democracy, and I've got to tell you that we take this responsibility, I take this responsibility very seriously. And I am so proud to have returned to this floor at this time to exercise my right to join with my colleagues in exercising this responsibility and to correct something that is so wrong and so unjust. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Senator Strickland, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I would like to bring it back to the bill that's before us instead of rehash the presidential campaign. And I also, I want to point out on the open of this debate, Mr. Leader, who I have deep respect for, said we had fake outrage. I'm here to say there's nothing fake about our outrage on our side of the aisle. I hear a lot of different terminologies being used by the other side. The word authoritarian came up very, very frequently. Well, it's authoritarian to have a predetermined election. And that's exactly what will happen if we pass and the people pass ACA 8. We will have predetermined elections where there's no competition in California, and that is authoritarian. I do trust the voters of California. And a lot of the members here say, well, why don't you just trust the voters of California because they get to decide the final say in November. I do trust the voters. However, I don't trust the truth in advertising. We need to have truth in advertising. And when you look at this, what's going to be called the title and summary with the Attorney General, the first lines are going to be, do you want to keep the Nonpartisan Citizens Redistricting Commission? Members, you know that's not true. You know that's not truth in advertising. And I'm glad one of my colleagues called out the high-speed rail, because at the time when that came forward, I said there was no truth in advertising to that bill. Because I said it won't be $33 billion, and it won't go from San Francisco to Los Angeles.
Point of order.
By the way,
just a moment.
I'm responding.
Just a moment. Just a moment. Just a moment. What is your point of order?
Point of order. There's nothing on the floor before us today that has anything to do with high-speed rail and the arguments that our colleague from Huntington Beach has made in the past about high-speed rail, and I just ask that he stick to the matters on the floor. Thank you.
Madam President, I'm responding to a member.
Just a moment. Just a moment.
Truth in advertising.
Thank you. So seeing that a senator did mention high-speed rail earlier, we are going to allow for latitude to allow Senator Strickland to include those in his remarks. However, please try to keep your remarks as close to the measure that we are debating as close as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Again, I have faith in the California people and the California voters, but when they're misled in terms of what they're actually voting for, like the high-speed rail and like what's before us here today, when you're telling the people of California you're preserving the Nonpartisan Citizens Redistricting Commission, you're not being truthful to the people of California. And again, we've done this without transparency. We haven't done it in the light of day. But again, I firmly believe when it comes down to it, the people of California, if this bill moves forward, the people of California will fight to preserve what is a Nonpartisan Citizens Redistricting Commission, a gold standard, because they don't want the authoritarian politics to have predetermined elections. They want to have a voice. And they will not have a voice in California if this bill moves forward. And instead of people in Congress earning the votes of their citizens, the elections will be predetermined. And I can't think of anything more authoritarian than having predetermined elections. And for that reason, I urge a no vote on AC 8.
Thank you. Senator Padilla, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam President and colleagues. I rise in support. You know, to be honest, Madam President, I'm reminded of a famous line from a classical movie we're all familiar with, The Wizard of Oz. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. The question before the Senate on this amendment is first whether we should adopt its content, what it does, and whether we should submit it to the voters of California for their good judgment to decide whether or not to adopt it and to put it into operation. But really, Madam President, this is a conversation about the why and not the what. I think we know the what a contrast it presents. Sitting President of the United States phones up the governor of Texas with their time-honored tradition of gerrymandering and being in court, defending that they don't violate the Voting Rights Act, disenfranchising voters, doing it their way, which they're entitled to do. But in this case, having a sitting president ask that they do it now, mid-census, with an eye towards the next midterm elections for representation in the United States House of Representatives. And so here we are with this question in response to that, but doing it slightly differently. Not because a president called us up and said, can you find me some more districts? But putting the question before the people, enfranchising and empowering the voters of California to make this critical decision and paying them the respect and honesty as to the why. And we should think about the why. Why is it important in the midterms for the U.S. House of Representatives that there be an even exchange of debate and ideas and opportunity for the people of this country to decide what that House looks like? Instead of giving greater weight to one point of view before the game is even played and diminishing the voices of another point of view, the why is pretty obvious, is to continue the trajectory and the policies of regression and reduction and undoing that we are witnessing in this time at a level we've never seen in modern American history. That's why it's important to balance the equation so that all voices in our congressional midterms have an opportunity to be heard, not for its own sake, but because of what is at stake. There was a young Democratic president in January of 1961 named John Kennedy, who talked about being part of a generation of leaders, new leaders, that were not and were unwilling to witness or permit the slow undoing of the basic human rights for which this nation has always been committed here at home and around the world. And 2 decades later, a Republican president named Ronald Reagan, upon taking his oath, talked incredibly and articulately well about the fact that freedom and the dignity of the individual must be and has been more available and assured here in this country than in any other place on earth. The question is really about the why. Why did President Trump ask Texas to act? Why is it important that they rig the game before it's played? It's not for its own sake. It's for what they want to continue to do. The slow undoing. The slow undoing that we witnessed in the undoing of individual liberties and protections, ignoring courts of law, the snatching of persons by unidentified masked agents off the streets, something people haven't seen since behind the Iron Curtain during the Cold War and in the most oppressive states in the world, pushing millions out of the social safety net, those who can least afford it and those who are most vulnerable. The undoing that is the biggest tax giveaway in American history to the wealthiest Americans at the expense of the most vulnerable. The retreating from American leadership abroad in the world, the failure to defend territorial integrity, sovereignty, and democracy, to stand for something that we pledge allegiance to every day. The slow undoing. And the question today, colleagues, are we part of a new generation of leaders in 2025 who are unwilling to witness or permit that continued slow undoing of everything we hold dear? Are we going to be part of a generation of leaders that are determined to be sure that the freedom and dignity of the individual must be available and assured here in America, more so than in any other place on earth. That's what this debate is really about. We must be that generation of leaders. And I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you. Senator Rubio, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, today I rise first and foremost as a teacher, just thinking about what this moment means to my students. As a former council member, just thinking of how this moment is going to impact my community. And as a formerly elected city clerk who ran elections, what this means to democracy. And I rise in strong support of ACA 8. And now, of course, as a state senator, caring very much about what happens in this beautiful state to the beautiful people of California. But I want to be clear, I've been hearing over and over from my colleagues their outrage about the money that's being spent in this election. And really, I think the outrage is hollow. One of the things that keeps running through my mind constantly is that, we have a president, Donald Trump, who has wasted millions and millions of dollars of our tax dollars in his own luxury. And we haven't heard any outrage about that spending. He has spent millions of dollars retrofitting a private jet that he received from a foreign country, no less. He is currently spending millions of dollars on a grand ballroom so that he can continue to have his lavish parties. And he continues to spend money gold plating our White House that was meant to be white. And yet we have so many of our seniors whose lives are being threatened, healthcare being cut back, and their Social Security also threatened. We have our students, our children, our community members who now are going to be impacted by the cutbacks in SNAP and food assistance. And it always happens to the most vulnerable. But let's not talk about the millions in that ballroom that's going to have gold plating. And then we don't think about the millions that were spent deploying our military on American soil, on Americans. While college students are not going to be able to afford to go to college because their grants were frozen. I don't remember the outrage over those tax dollars. And never mind that his children and himself continue to make billions. He didn't divest. And I believe he has continued to violate the Emoluments Clause. Again, where is the outrage? They're making billions. The truth is that the outrage is not over the spending. It's about accountability. It's about democracy itself. And that is why ACA 8 matters so much. Because we need to give Californians the power to decide if it matters to them as well. And I believe that the way this is set up, it does. We're giving Californians the power to decide in November for themselves if this is fair and it's in the hands of the voters. And if we don't protect democracy now, then when? When it's gone? And history is looking back. History will look back on us. Future generations will look back on us. And I think this is the right time to do the right thing. Government should always be about service and not self-indulgence, as we have seen from our president. It's about feeding children, not feeding egos, as we have seen from the president. It's about protecting seniors, not protecting golf outings, as we have seen from the president. ACA 8 is our chance to say enough, to put power back where it belongs, and that is in the hands of our Californian people. The maps are already online. They will be printed on official voter guides. Voters will have plenty of time to review them and cast their vote. The people will decide, all Californians will decide, and it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. So with that, I respectfully ask for your aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Smallwood Cuevas. You are recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. And colleagues, I rise in strong support of ACA 8. Today's conversation just reminded me of something that my grandmother said, and that is, if you don't know your history, your children will be doomed to repeat it. When our people marched across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, facing dogs and fire hoses and the terror of Jim Crow and racial violence, we were not only demanding the right to vote for ourselves, we were expanding the promise of democracy for the nation. And out of that sacrifice came the Voting Rights Act of 1965, the most important civil rights law in our history. And yet, every year since the act was passed, Texas has found ways to violate it. A reminder that progress is never permanent and vigilant is always required. And Californians know, and what today's vote on ACA 8 is about, is that this fight is not over. The same forces that tried to stop us in Selma are still working today to silence our voices through voter suppression and this Texas gerrymandering. In fact, we must honor the Voting Rights Act not just with memory, but with action. And we must protect the right to vote and ensure that we are strengthening all communities of interest, ensuring people who have saved our democracy can never be shut out again. ACA 8 is about one thing: defending our democracy from being rigged by a tyrant. Texas and other Republican-led states are rushing through a mid-decade redistricting scheme designed to steal seats in Congress. In Texas, what this looks like is that Black Texans will lose much of their power, being reduced to about a fifth of what their power was before this gross attack. This is not just a power grab. It is a direct attack on communities of interest, on young voters, and on anyone who stands for equity and justice and due process of law. Californians, we understand that we cannot sit back while these extremists tilt the balance of power under this hand of Donald Trump and unchecked control of Congress. We cannot let this happen. And ACA 8 provides a safeguard. It states that if Texas gerrymanders their maps, California will temporarily adjust ours to level the playing field. And we understand we always need to work at leveling the playing field. Time and time again, when our nation's future was on the line, this history of the Black vote is key because it's carried us forward. ACA 8 offsets partisan gerrymanders in Texas. It protects vulnerable communities here in California. And it's not maps alone that safeguard our future. Let's remember our history. And let's take a closer look at Texas history. Texas once saw Black political power rise during Reconstruction, as it had across much of the country, only to be stripped away by the Black codes and Jim Crow and racial terror, poll taxes, white-only primaries that cut Black voter rolls in Texas from over 100,000 to just a few thousand. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 reclaimed that. But today's gerrymandering in Texas, the voter suppression, shows that Texas is now sliding back. A reminder that every generation must fight to keep democracy alive, and that is what we are stepping up to the plate to do here in California. This is bigger than what we are doing on this floor, and it's bigger than what our voters will have to do this November. This is about sending a clear message to the nation and the world that we will not allow Donald Trump and MAGA Republicans to steal elections from the people. We know what happens when Trump has power. Many of my colleagues have described the painful and cruelty of it. Denying disaster relief to fire victims, imposing illegal tariffs that is destroying our economy and threatening hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of workers. He's hurting working families by rolling back over 60 years of hard-fought labor protections. He's ordered the mass arrest, deportations, racial profiling, and terrorizing of families and children. He's criminalizing diversity, dismantling DEI programs that protect equity in our schools and in our workplaces, and that allows us to grow and be innovative by bringing new voices and ideas and thought partners to the table. If given unchecked control, we know that Trump will roll back decades of human, civil, women, workers' rights. ACA 8 is California once again standing up to defend democracy, just as we have led on climate resiliency, just as we have led on workers' rights, on women's rights, on equity. Today, we will lead on protecting free and fair elections. Let's make sure the voice of California and all Californians will not be silenced by partisan power grabs at the hands of a dictator. And with that, I respectfully urge and I vote on ACA 8.
Thank you. Senator Arreguín, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. Senators, I rise in strong support of ACA 8, a bill that is vital to the preservation of our democracy that is under assault by President Trump. And first, let me address the question of whether it is legal for us to take this action today. The legislature and the voters often put constitutional amendments on the ballot. And what we are doing today is putting this question to the voters and giving them the opportunity to decide whether to allow for the temporary implementation of these congressional boundaries if the voters approve this measure. In today's debate, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have failed to address what I think is the elephant in the room. Their party's leader, President Trump, and the Republicans in Texas who are gerrymandering Democratic and majority districts to give Trump 5 new Republican seats in Congress. And why? The president is afraid that he can't win an election in a fair fight. So he has to rig the process to give his party an unfair partisan advantage. That is not fairness. So we wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the president's actions and the actions of the governor of Texas and the Texas legislature. I wish we weren't here today, but we are. And I would agree with my Republican colleagues. We have a lot of important business to address for our state. But this is probably just, if not more important than that business that we have to take up over the next few weeks, because the impact of Trump and the Republican congressional majority have had in our state has been so significant. So much of what has impacted our state over the last 8 months has been directly in response to the devastating policies of this administration. I've also heard concerns about the costs of this special election. But let's put this in the context of what's at stake. Potentially billions of cuts to state grants and funding by the Trump administration. Within the first month, the Trump administration tried to freeze federal funds to California. And let's also remember that we are the largest donor to the federal government. 1 in 4 taxes are paid by Californians. Thanks to the actions of Democrats in this legislature by providing emergency funding and the actions of our Attorney General, we unfroze $168 billion in federal funds, approximately 1/3 of our state's budget. We also took action to prevent $11 billion in health and human services cuts and $7 billion in transportation cuts. That doesn't even account for the devastating cuts that will be realized by the passage of H.R. 1 to our federal Medicaid budget, which will kick millions of Californians off of health care coverage, the cuts to SNAP, which will mean that children and families will starve in our state, the threatened cuts to education funding and other essential programs. This will further crater our state's budget. What's at stake is also our state's economic prosperity. This administration's trade policies are having a direct impact on our state's budget and are wreaking havoc on our state's economy. So when we talk about budget deficits, where do we think they come from? My constituents in Senate District 7 in the East Bay and people across the nation are outraged seeing the federal government destroying their livelihoods, from dismantling our safety nets, eliminating health care coverage, reversing the progress that we've made on civil rights and on environmental protections, and the kidnapping of our hardworking immigrant neighbors. Our constituents call on us to take meaningful action during these unprecedented times, and ACA 8 is that action to give voters an opportunity to take a stand. Now, I'm a proud supporter of independent redistricting, something that our state will retain even if the voters approve this map. And I believe that all states should have independent commissions, something that congressional Republicans have long opposed. And so as the author had mentioned, ACA 8 specifically calls on Congress to adopt legislation and to put on before all the states a constitutional amendment to allow for independent commissions nationwide. But why have Republicans in Congress opposed these efforts? Why are they afraid of giving power to redistrict to the people? Do they not believe in free and fair elections? To me, the answer is simple, because if the people had their way, Congress would actually reflect the will of the people. So Trump's solution is to push our 250-year experiment in democracy to the brink in order to hold on to power. So the question before us is a simple one. Will we enable this assault on our democracy, a necessary step to continue the president's attacks on immigrants, the LGBTQ plus community, on reproductive rights, on anyone who dares to stand against authoritarianism? Or will we say enough is enough and take action to counter these attacks? During this critical moment, I urge you to stand on the side of democracy. Colleagues, the country's watching what we are doing here today, and history will remember what we do. With that, I respectfully ask for your aye vote on ACA 8.
Thank you. Senator Cortese, you are recognized.
Well, thank you, Madam President. I rise in support of ACA 8. We are here today because our democracy is under attack, as we've heard over and over and over again. But what does that really mean in specifics? We've seen the dangers of unchecked power. What does that really mean today in this context? After the last national elections, the President of the United States was able to consolidate power in the executive branch, in the House and the Senate, and he has a very favorable judicial branch. Most of us are taught in 8th grade civics that those three branches of government are supposed to check themselves, but democracy was in play. The American people voted, and we are where we are. But when you talk about trusting the voters, what I've seen over and over and over again in my lifetime, especially my voting lifetime, is that the American people are the other branch of government. The American people will check and will swing the pendulum back when they see the three branches of government become too extreme. And that's happened. And the President of the United States was surrounded by his own advisors who said that your extreme policies are going to cost us the midterm elections. And when you cost us the midterm elections, you cost us the consolidation of power. Just as my colleague from Berkeley and others have said here today. You're going to cost us unified power for the Republican Party in this country, but more importantly, for our extreme policies. Why? Because the one thing that can check all three branches of government is the sanctity of the vote, the franchise of the vote. And that's when the President of the United States said, unless we can disenfranchise those voters, then we've got them too. And that's the decision that was made. And that's why this president and this administration is such a powerful threat to democracy, because he's no longer consolidating power among three branches of government. He's disenfranchising and literally taking away the right to vote for whom people want to vote. That's manipulation of democracy and the vote. But we're doing it differently here under ACA 8. Here in California, we're saying, as our governor has said, we can counter what's going on in Texas. We can counter what's going on in the administration. But here, because of the way that we operate, we're going back to the people of California. We're respecting the sanctity of the vote. And we're going to ask the voters of California, what do they choose? Do they choose the methodology that we have in place now for selecting our congressional representatives? Or in light of what's going on in Washington and Texas, do they want to change the rules? They get to decide. They get to decide. And so here in California, the sanctity of the vote is paramount. In Washington, D.C., it's not. That's the difference. That's why ACA is not a power grab, quite the opposite. It's a safeguard. It's a temporary safeguard, and California voters, not politicians, will decide whether we should use this temporary safeguard to keep the playing field level, and whether we should protect our democracy from a power grab by our president, not just of three branches of government. ACA puts that choice squarely in the hands of the people. Why do we call this authoritarian overreach? Think about it for a moment. This president has gone to an autonomous state, Texas, a self-governing state, Texas, a freestanding state, Texas, a sovereign state within the United States of America, and said, you'll do what I tell you to do. ACA 8 is the only thing we have in our toolbox to counter that, but we have tools, and we'll use those tools. Thank you, and I urge your aye vote.
Thank you, Senator Grove. You're recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. Again, I wasn't going to speak on this because I wanted to voice my opinion on the previous bill, and they're all considered a package, but I do want to set the record straight and make some comments with some leeway from Madam President regarding some of the comments that were made on the floor. Again, if you look at the lawsuit between Petaway versus Galveston County, the court, the three branches of government that were just mentioned by my good colleague, that the court ordered Texas to redraw the lines. President Trump did not order Texas to redraw the lines. This is an independent judge. He said, redraw the lines based on a lawsuit filed by the Elias Commission, which I described earlier. It's absurd to stand, and again, I just love my good colleague. I mean, he's only right 10% of the time, but when he's right, I agree with him, but he's right wrong a lot of the times. My good colleague from San Francisco made the comment that UCLA was being punished by a mean dictator because they were being fined $1 billion by President Trump. UCLA is being fined by the president because they failed to protect Jewish students, where Jewish students were attacked, threatened, locked in rooms, refused to allow to go to class. They won a $600 million lawsuit against the university system, and President Trump fined the UC system $1 billion for not protecting Jewish students. Nobody wants to relive history in the 1940s and that era, that time frame of World War II. And the president is standing up for Jewish students. That's why he fined them $1 billion. So just a point of clarification to my good friend and my colleague from San Francisco and the co-chair of the Legislative Jewish Caucus. That was a justification, and we should all stand behind the fact that people who hurt and harm our Jewish communities should be punished in some way. And I applaud the president for doing this. Again, read Galveston versus Petty Way versus Galveston County. That's what started this whole thing. It was not President Trump. It was a court case. It was required Texas to redraw the lines, which triggered your response, which is going to trigger a lot of other responses. And as I made in my comments earlier, Maryland, Democrats occupy 7 out of 8 seats, even though 40% of the votes were Republican. Massachusetts, all 9 seats are Democratic, despite President Trump getting 40% of the vote. It continues down the line, and this ACA to gerrymander even further the seats that you have in California, where Republicans got 40% of the vote, and we occupy 17% of the congressional seats, and to allow these maps with no other choice other than the voters to say no, for this to happen based on the rhetoric that is coming out of this body that it's President Trump, it's a court case. The documents are right there. I'd be glad to send it all to you. Most of you are attorneys. I barely have a high school diploma, and I was able to read that and determine where the lawsuit came from. Respectfully ask for a no vote.
Thank you. Senator Perez, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm proud to rise in support of ACA 8 as well as a co-author of the Election Rigging Response Act. You know, I think it's really important that we articulate why we are here today and why we are even taking up ACA 8. Over the last several weeks, we have seen Texas Republicans, along with Governor Greg Abbott, take actions to try to redraw their maps to add an additional 5 Republican seats. In addition to that, they have threatened Texas Democrats, enforcing police force against them to go searching for them, threatening to utilize the FBI, and in one case, even locking a Texas legislator in the chambers, refusing to allow her to leave unless she signed and agreed to have 24-hour surveillance. We have Texas members of the legislature, Democratic members, that are being followed by police officers in the grocery store. This is complete absurdity and complete madness. And while I heard clearly from my Republican colleagues that they do not believe that President Donald Trump reached out to Governor Greg Abbott, we have seen otherwise, that the president has reached out to Texas Governor Greg Abbott to ask him to deliver these 5 Republican seats, that he's reached out to the states of Missouri, Florida, Ohio, Indiana, and possibly even Kansas in order to redistrict the maps so that he can turn the 2026 election in his favor. Now, why is this happening? That is because the president has moved forward a set of policies that is wildly unpopular. We have seen the cost of living skyrocket. We have seen ICE raids across our community. We had a man die in Camarillo, Mr. Alanis, who died while running from an ICE raid, fell more than 30 feet to his death. Just a few days ago, a man died in my district. Roberto Carlos Montoyo Valdez was killed when he was running from an ICE raid and was struck by a vehicle. This is unacceptable, and I want to emphasize this, that lives are on the line. That is what is on the line. We are not just talking simply about funding. We talk a lot about numbers in this House and the millions of dollars that have been cut from education, from healthcare, from food programs, the millions of dollars that are being spent on additional ICE raids, on surveillance and policing of our communities. But what has that ultimately resulted in? That has ultimately resulted in people dying, people losing access to critical health care, less people showing up to their doctor's appointments, less people having access to healthy and nutritious food. And ultimately, that is going to have an impact on the 2026 elections, because voters know, Americans know, regardless of party, They are seeing that these policies are not yielding results for them, that this is an administration that is more interested in investing in billionaires and trillionaires and their interest in giving them huge tax breaks than everyday working people like you and me. And it is utterly unacceptable. Now, what we have done here today in introducing ACA 8 is allow us to neutralize what is happening in Texas so that we can create an additional 5 Democratic seats to stop this mess and stop this chaos. But what does it also do? It protects our independent redistricting commission, something that was approved by the voters, and it was not easy to get it approved. It was put on the ballot several times. We finally earned the support of the voters. You have both Democrats and Republicans that serve on that commission. They will be redrawing the lines come 2030 again, and that is important. That is critical. And I want to highlight that it is Democratic states that have independent redistricting commissions. It is not Republican states. In fact, here in the United States, the 5 most gerrymandered states are Republican states. And we need to call that out. To continue to pretend as if partisan gerrymandering was just something that came up, as if California created this, to watch the Vice President, J.D. Vance, continue to spread this misinformation is utterly unacceptable. What do we know? That back in 2021, when Democrats introduced a measure to ban partisan gerrymandering, it was Senate Republicans who killed it. And we could have stopped this mess then, but they have refused to allow such a measure to pass. And we know that come 2026, voters are going to turn out and they're going to send a message. They're going to send a message that they do not support cuts to food stamps, that they do not support cuts to Medicare programs, that they do not support ICE raids in their communities, robbing their neighbors in broad daylight and causing deaths left and right of hard-working people, farm workers, day laborers, blue-collar workers that look like my father and my grandfather, that they do not support Republicans leaving session early in Congress to prevent the release of the Epstein files. We are going to hear loud and clear come 2026. And that's what this moment is about. California is stepping up. We did not want this battle. And I want to make very clear, and folks that have worked with me know, I have been very invested in independent redistricting. We have moved measures like this forward at the local level. But unfortunately, this is a moment that requires us to respond. California didn't pick this battle, but we can end it. And that is our job here today. I urge an aye vote on ACA 8, and I'm so proud to be supporting and co-authoring this message. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Senator Nielo, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. With regard to some final comments of my friend from Pasadena relative to who supports and doesn't support redistricting, at least in this state, I would just make reference to my past historical notes when I spoke to the previous bill. But I have a question of the author.
Will the author take a question?
Yes, Madam President.
Thank you. You may proceed.
And in connection with that, I'd like permission to read.
Seeing no objection, you may proceed.
I am reading from Article 21, Redistricting of the state constitution, redistricting of Senate, Assembly, Congressional, and Board of Equalization districts. This is Section 2J. If the commission does not approve a final map by at least the requisite votes, or, and this is the relevant section, if voters disapprove a certified final map in a referendum, the Secretary of State shall immediately petition the California Supreme Court for an order directing the appointment of special masters to adjust the boundary lines of that map in accordance with the redistricting criteria and requirements set forth in 3 other previous subdivisions. Upon its approval of the master's map, the court shall certify the resulting map to the Secretary of State, which map shall constitute the certified final map for the subject type district. Now, within the allowance of ACA 8 and the issues we're speaking today, it does ask the voters to disapprove the certified final maps, but with other maps being substituted, which is in direct conflict with that specified by this constitutional requirement. So my question is, how does that not make this unconstitutional?
Thank you, Madam President. First, let me emphasize that the Senate's paid close attention to each word in each provision of the constitutional amendment and the construction of this bill along with our colleagues in the Assembly, but also to point out what might be the obvious, that this is Assembly Constitutional Amendment number 8, and therefore its provisions already being not inconsistent with the Constitution will amend the Constitution, and they will be, by definition, if the voters choose to enact them, they will be constitutional.
So in other words, you are actually amending Article 21.
No, so Article 21 of the Constitution remains in place as a result of ACA 8. ACA 8 adds new provisions to the Constitution and an alternative procedure that is temporary and for this one purpose and this one time, an alternative that the voters have the ability through their votes to enact. And the Senate has complied in every respect with the entire Constitution in the drafting of this measure.
So this also amends or basically eliminates Section 2J.
Now, Section 2J, remember...
Excuse me. Will the Senator take another question?
Yes, Madam President. Section 2J, as you know, my colleague from Fair Oaks, Section 2J exists in the article that describes the procedure by which the Commission constructs the maps after each decennial census. And in fact, that is the first line of that article, is each 10 years after the census, the following is what is to occur. This ACA 8 creates a different provision of the Constitution, this alternative procedure that would be temporary for this one-time purpose. And so as long as it's not inconsistent with other provisions of the Constitution, this measure gives the people the power to design the proper approach for this one-time temporary measure. So it is not inconsistent with, it fully complies with the Constitution.
Well, thank you for that. On my own time, all of the testimony here by everybody that we believe we have an excellent system for redistricting after each census, and we will most certainly go back to that after 2030. Nonetheless, again, referring back to my little history dissertation earlier today, and the reported involvement of the DCCC in this action that is going on that has been developed behind the scenes, one has to be awfully suspicious of significant changes to this process and whether indeed the intent or the power to continue on our previous track after 2030 is of great concern to me, and I think should be of great concern to everybody who votes in favor of this ACA and the other 2 bills that we have, and of great concern to the voters of California once this goes on the ballot.
Thank you. Senator Wahab, you are recognized.
Thank you. I first just want to state that I try really hard to represent my entire district, both Republicans, Democrats, as well as independents, non-voters, new immigrants, and anybody that lives in my district. And I believe that is the role of when we create policy. It is for the entire state of California. representing all people. Just as when we do a census, it's about all people. And it was referenced about lawsuits. In 2023, the Supreme Court ruled in Abbott versus Perez that Texas's redistricting plan violated the Voting Rights Act, mandating that voters of color be placed in districts with more opportunities to elect their preferred candidates. And continuously, we have seen that Texas has been violating the Voting Rights Act since 1965, and even this most recent action in August of this month of 2025, we are seeing violations being made. And I heard multiple times today a number of things that it's wrong what's being done, and there's zero transparency, and it's a power grab. And I call that into question. So when President Trump calls for Texas to do a partisan mid-decade redraw, which handed themselves +5 GOP seats behind closed doors, is that okay? Shutting down Democrats in these rushed maps, is that okay? The fact that California is different. We're giving voters a final say and opportunity to use their voice by voting on this effort, the highest form of transparency for all voters. We hear that it's unconstitutional or overturning the will of the voters. And the US Constitution does not forbid mid-decade redistricting. In fact, California's Constitution requires voter approval, which is exactly what we are doing. We are following the rules and going to the voters. The commission remains in place. Even after this is a temporary safeguard until 2030. And again, it's up to the voters, not politicians, deciding whether to authorize this action. That's respecting the will of the people. We are going to the voters. So I've heard Democrats are hypocrites. But the real hypocrisy, I will say, is claiming to support housing, childcare, and healthcare, but voting no consistently on funding those items. Calling themselves the party of law and order, but excusing President Trump's attempt to overturn the 2020 election and pardoning the January 6th rioters. Claiming to care about women and children, but blocking the release of the Epstein files of sexual abuse of children and women. Call for the release of the Epstein files. I want to see the Epstein files. I'm sure many of my colleagues, as much as we talk about it, as much as we talk about human trafficking, children, women of color, and the abuse of power, call for the release of the Epstein files. And he died under President Trump's administration with a failure of cameras, dereliction of duty of guards, and much more. And the other party is silent. And then people want to say, especially in California, especially at the national level, that Governor Newsom is just raising his profile. Well, guess what? America is getting engaged, and this nation is just now seeing what Californians already know. When others are scared to act, Governor Gavin Newsom shows the courage to lead. As a woman, a daughter of immigrants, a former foster youth, the actions at the federal level have been a direct attack on each of us for every identity and ideal we hold dear. I'm proud to heed Governor Newsom's call to defend our democracy. Finally, a leader willing to boldly take on what is happening in this country. And so with this vote is giving the choice back to the voters of California. I trust the voters, and for the greater good I respectfully ask for an aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion or debate, Senator Cabaldon, would you like to close?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. Let me first remind us of what is in ACA 8. The first and critical provision is a call to the Congress of the United States to put an end to this madness that has consumed the country thanks to Donald Trump in Texas, and submit a constitutional amendment to all of the states for nationwide redistricting reform. Number two, the authorization for the people of California to approve this temporary set of maps that will allow us to fight back, push back, and preserve democracy across the country. And third, to make it very clear that the Independent Redistricting Commission is undisturbed by this constitutional amendment, and it will be back in 2031 for the drawing of the new lines after the census, as is its constitutional responsibility. Now, we've heard said that Texas isn't meaning to do anything devious or untoward here. They're simply complying with a court order. Well, in this country, a strongly worded letter from Attorney General Pam Bondi at the urging of President Donald Trump, following up one of his phone calls demanding that you serve up 5 seats on a silver platter, is not a legally binding court order that requires emergency action on this time frame. That is a ruse that they don't even say that in Texas. The chair of the Texas Elections Committee and the author of the new maps has made it very clear. This is a partisan map that we are doing in order to increase Republican power at the urging of President Donald Trump. Now, in the Elections Committee hearing led by our outstanding elections chair from Riverside, one of the witnesses, a former member of the Independent Commission, said that democracy means that that each political party, each idea takes turns being humbled at the ballot box by the people. That is the essence of what democracy is, that we have our policy programs, our ideas, our accountability, and our results, and we go to the voters, and sometimes they applaud and reelect us. Sometimes they say, no, thank you. That is ultimately the essence of democracy, not Article 2J, not something else. It is that notion that all of us, even if we actually have the key or the card key to the Capitol building, or to the governor's office, we have the keys, our names on the door, that we do not own that we serve at the likelihood that we will at one point be humbled. What's happening in Texas, what's happening as a result of the proposed changes to the census and mail-in balloting, is an attempt to immunize, to end that cycle, so we will never have accountability and democracy again. And you heard this in our debate today, as it was said. That one of our Republican colleagues said, I have faith in the voters. I have faith in the voters, absolute faith in the voters, except, and let me turn back to the ballot measure that shall not be named, but except when they get it wrong because they've paid too much attention to advertising. And when they get it wrong because they listen to a governor. Right, so when the campaign is not exactly balanced, then we can't listen to the voters in that case. And fundamentally, that is what's going wrong with our democracy. The idea that democracy is only real if it bolsters our power, if it agrees with our ideology and with our issues. And so this measure protects the power of the people to assure that they can hold us, the Congress, and the President of the United States accountable for all of the things that have been said today. And it is the case that millions of Californians are asking themselves in the face of all of these threats to democracy, to safety, to healthcare, to everything. What can I do about it? The fear, the resolute anger of Californians about this. And all of us hear this every single day. What are you doing, and what can I do? And this is our answer. We, Californians, California voters, have the opportunity not just to raise our voices, but to cast our votes. The most fundamental way of rescuing democracy is by casting our votes if this measure allows the ACA to go on the ballot. Now, and it still matters because H.R. 1 and the census changes, everything else is still pending in terms of implementation. And so let us not, in a year when one of our residents says, I'm not getting my Social Security, and none of the helplines, they've all been turned off. Doge fired everybody. Let us not say, well, what about the cost of that special election? When somebody says my hospital in the rural parts of my district is gone. Who's going to stand up and say, but did you know that that one bill had an urgency clause in it? When my Navy son has been abducted off the streets in LA, who of us is going to say, but the amendments really weren't germane? When we lose our votes, either directly through the mail or our seats in Congress, which of us is going to say, well, you know, the voters might have gotten it wrong if we gave them their voice? When Marines and National Guard are ordered against their will to occupy, I don't know, West Sacramento, San Diego, Murrieta, any other part of California, as they are already doing in DC and as they started here in California, will we say that the voters just couldn't be trusted to make a hard, complicated decision like this? No. This is what this vote is about. Let the voters make the decision. We've heard them, and we are responding, and they are the ultimate judges of whether this is the right way forward. The voters of California are sovereign, regardless of Article J. They are sovereign. They have the authority, they have the legitimacy, and with ACA, they will have the power to make this right. Madam President, I urge an aye vote.
Thank you. Secretary, please call the roll.
Allen. Aye. Alvarado Gil. Archuleta. Aye. Adeguin. Aye. Ashby. Aye. Becker. Aye. Blakespear. Aye. Cabaldon. Aye. Caballero. Aye. Cervantes. Aye. Choi. No. Cortezi. Aye. Daly. No. Durazo. Aye. Gonzalez. Aye. Grayson. Aye. Grove. No. Hurtado. Aye. Jones. No. Laird. Aye. Limon. Aye. McGuire. Aye. McNerney. Aye. Menjivar. Aye. Nilo. No. Ochoa Bog. No. Padilla. Aye. Perez. Aye. Reyes. Aye. Richardson. Rubio. Aye. Cigarto. Smallwood Cuevas. Aye. Stern. Aye. Strickland. No. Umbert. Aye. Valadares. No. Wahab. Aye. Weber Pearson.
Aye.
Aye. Wiener. Aye.
Secretary, please call the absent members.
Alvarado Gil. Richardson. Aye. Cigarto.
Ayes 30, noes 8. That measure passes. Members, we have messages from the Assembly. Secretary, please read.
Assembly Chamber, August 21, 2025. Madam President, I am directed to inform your honorable body that the Assembly amended and on this day passed, as amended, Senate Bill 280, and respectfully request your honorable body to concur in said amendments. Sue Parker, Chief Clerk of the Assembly, above bill order to unfinished business.
Thank you. Members, we will now move to Senate Supplemental File number 2. Secretary, please read.
Senate Bill 280 by Senator Cervantes, an act relating to elections, making an appropriation therefore, and declaring the urgency thereof to take effect immediately.
Senator Cervantes, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam President and members. Today, I am proud to present Senate Bill 280, which calls for a statewide special election on November 4 of this year. This special election gives Californians the power to decide whether we redraw our congressional districts to protect fair representation through Assembly Constitutional Amendment 8. SB 280 also appropriates the funding necessary for the Secretary of State and our county registrars to administer this election. The bill also makes the necessary statutory changes to allow the June 2026 statewide primary to be held on time. Members, this is not politics as usual. This is a rigged game. We are here because the federal administration and Republicans in Congress know they are losing. They see the scoreboard. They know their playbook is unpopular, and instead of competing fairly, they are changing the rules of the game. Think about it. They send mass federal agents into our communities, snatching people up because their skin tone looks like mine. They slashed health care for millions while handing billionaires a tax break and slapping working families with tariff taxes on everyday essentials like coffee and bananas. They know voters will hold them accountable. So what do? They redraw the field. Just yesterday in Texas, Republicans have redrawn congressional maps so that instead of voters choosing their representatives, politicians get to choose their voters. Let's be clear. The goal is to lock in power. But in California, we aren't just spectators in the stand, we are stepping up to the plate. California is ready to defend fairness, to defend representation, and to defend democracy. Now, some of our colleagues will ask, why the urgency? Why the special election? Because this is a 5-alarm fire blazing in our democracy. And if you don't see that, it's because you're choosing to ignore it. And let's not pretend that this timeline is unusual. Republicans were more than happy to rush through the failed recall of Governor Newsom in 75 days. The clock ran then, and it can run now. Yes, this election will cost money, but let's be clear. The price tag is less than President Trump's golden White House ballroom. What's the cost of protecting fair play in America? It's nothing compared to letting President Trump cheat the country. We will not let him move the goalpost. The truth is, a republic where people fear practicing their beliefs or worry their vote won't be counted is no republic at all. That is not a democracy. On November 4th, the voters of California can punch back. They can say no more to power grabs. They can say no more to cheating. They can take back their agency, take it back at the ballot box. Take back your power on November 4th. Take it back for California and for our country. Californians aren't going to quit in the fourth quarter. We will not fold in extra innings because this is our spirit, this is our fight, and when the dust settles, California will remain standing. I respectfully ask for an aye vote on SB 280.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion or debate, Secretary, would you... Senator McNerney, would you like to? You are recognized.
Madam President and colleagues, I rise in strong support of SB 280 because it's logical. Yes, it's logical to adopt the new congressional districts here in California, and here's why. First, this president's policies are hurting California and the country. For example, the deportations are decimating our workforce and terrorizing our families. The tariffs are taxes. Yes, the tariffs are taxes, and they're slowing our economy. Defunding our universities are robbing our future. He is throwing military into our cities, incredibly dangerous. He's throwing millions of people off health care across this country. Now, the Republicans in Congress have not and will not put any brakes on this president. He can do anything he wants. This is what dictators do. If the Republicans retain the majority in 2026 in the House of Representatives, the president will continue to degrade our country and make us a banana republic. But the Democrats can win a majority in the House in 2026 and will put brakes on the president unless he manages to rig the election. The president and the Texas Republicans are rigging the election by having adopted gerrymandered congressional districts just yesterday to replace 5 Democrats with 5 Republicans. They are trying to rig the national election. California is the only state in the union that has the people and the will to stand up to the president. This is our duty to fight fire with fire and approve new congressional districts that satisfy the Voting Rights Act. And, unlike Texas, we will ask the voters to judge the new districts. Democrats did not want this fight. We did not ask for this fight, but we will not run away from it. We will fight for our economy and for our values. Therefore, it's logical to put this question of adopting new congressional maps before the California voters on November 4th. California voters must have the right to decide if the state should respond to the president's efforts to rig the elections. If you think America needs more authoritarian government, then give up these 5 seats. I sure don't. I ask my colleagues, no, I implore my colleagues with respect to vote aye on Senate Bill 280.
Thank you. Senator Jones, you are recognized.
Madam President and members, I rise in opposition to SB 280. This bill is an unwanted, unnecessary, and expensive distraction. This measure would redirect scarce state resources and attention to an unnecessary, unwanted, and expensive legislative Democrat fabricated distraction. With the state facing a $12 billion deficit, an unemployment rate higher than any other state, a housing crisis, the highest poverty and homelessness rates among the states, an ongoing massive crime problem, and continued fire recovery needs, the last thing that this legislature should be doing is creating a massive distraction while also wasting scarce taxpayer funds on an unnecessary. The special election will cost alone are estimated at $250 million. $250 million for this unnecessary partisan power grab. I ask for a no vote.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion or debate, Senator Cervantes, would you like to close?
Thank you, Madam President. On November 4th, Californians have a choice. Let Trump cheat or punch back. Take back your agency. Take it back at the ballot box. Take it back for California and for the country.
Thank you. Secretary, please call the roll.
Allen. Aye. Alvarado Gil. Archuleta. Aye. Adeguin. Aye. Ashby. Aye. Becker. Aye. Blakespear. Aye. Cabaldon. Aye. Caballero. Aye. Cervantes. Aye. Choi. No. Cortezi. Aye. Daly. No. Durazo. Aye. Gonzalez. Aye. Grayson. Aye. Grove. No. Hurtado. Aye. Jones. No. Laird. Aye. Limon. Aye. McGuire. Aye. McNerney. Aye. Menjivar. Aye. Nilo. No. Ochoa Bog. No. Padilla. Aye. Perez. Aye. Reyes. Aye. Richardson. Aye. Rubio. Ciarto. Smallwood Cuevas. Aye. Stern. Aye. Strickland. No. Umbert. Aye. Valadares. No. Wahab. Aye. Weber Pearson. Aye. Wiener. Aye.
Secretary, please call the absent members.
Alvarado Gil. Rubio. Aye. Ciarto.
Ayes 30, noes 8 on the urgency. Ayes 30, noes 8 on the amendments. Assembly amendments are concurred in. Members, we are going to move back to motions and resolutions. There are floor amendments to AB 40 at the desk. Senator McGuire, are you prepared to make these amendments?
Thank you so much, Madam President and members. Amendments on AB 40 are at the desk. It's clear that the state of Texas is now pulling their own trigger as the State House voted last night to be able to advance redistricting. We anticipate the Senate will be acting tonight or tomorrow morning, and the bill will be signed into law by the end of the week. In order to keep the ballot initiative crystal clear, we're moving the trigger from the ACA, but in AB 40 it will remain in case something miraculous happens in Texas and everyone comes to their senses.
Thank you, Senator Jones. You are recognized.
President, thank you, Madam President. I have come to my senses, and I object to this motion and ask for a roll call vote.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion or debate, Secretary, please call the roll.
Allen. Aye. Alvarado Gil. Archuleta. Aye. Adeguin. Aye. Ashby. Aye. Becker. Aye. Blakespear. Aye. Cabaldon. Aye. Caballero. Aye. Cervantes. Aye. Choi. No. Cortezi. Aye. Daly. No. Durazo. Aye. Gonzalez. Aye. Grayson. Aye. Grove. No. Hurtado. Aye. Jones. No. Laird. Aye. Limon. Aye. McGuire. Aye. McNerney. Aye. Menjivar. Aye. Nilo. No. Ochoa Bog. No. Padilla. Aye. Perez. Aye. Reyes. Aye. Richardson. Aye. Rubio. Aye. Ciarto. Smallwood Cuevas. Aye. Stern. Aye. Strickland. No. Umberg. Aye. Valadares. No. Wahab. Aye. Weber Pearson. Aye. Wiener. Aye.
Ayes 30, noes 8. The amendments are adopted. There are additional floor amendments at the desk. If there are no objection, they will be deemed adopted. Seeing no objection, they are deemed adopted. Are there any other motions, resolutions? Anyone else want to remove an item? Senator Hurtado, you are recognized.
Under motions and resolutions, thank you, Madam President. At the request of the author, please pull file item 250 AB 1069 Baines off the consent calendar. Thank you.
The desk will note. Senator Allen.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to request the author remove file item 231 AB 290 by Bauer Kahan from the consent calendar for amendments.
The desk will note. Senator Cervantes.
At the request of the author, I'd like to pull item 1511. AB 1511.
The desk will note. Senator Umberg.
Thank you, Madam President. Please remove file item number 238, AB 515 from the consent calendar at the request of the author.
The desk will note. Senator Cervantes, were you removing that bill from the consent calendar? Okay, thank you. Okay. All right, if there is no other business, Senator McGuire, the desk is clear.
First of all, Madam President, I want to take a moment to say thank you.
I'm sorry, Senator
Okay.
McGuire. Oh. Senator Grove, you are recognized.
Thank you. I apologize, Mr. Pro Tem. I had requested a point of personal privilege. They didn't call me. I apologize deeply. Colleagues, on a lighter note, after today, for those of you that are Raiders fans or Saints fans, Derek Carr would be here on the floor on Monday. Please wear appropriate attire. Thank you. Sorry, Erica. Miss Contreras. She's like shaking her. Only team colors.
Thank you. Now there is no other business. Senator McGuire, the desk is clear.
Thank you so much, Madam President. I want to take a moment to say thank you, first and foremost, to our presiding officers of the week, Madam President, and of course to Mr. Senator. Can we please give them a round of applause? Thank you to the good doctor, and of course to Mr. Grayson, who did a phenomenal job as well. This has been one heck of a week for presiding officers. Number two, I want to take a moment to say thank you to the senators who are in this chamber. We had some passionate, intense, and at times spicy debate today. But I think once we leave these chambers, we recognize, again, we are Californians first. Yes, we're going to have to fight the election rigging, but we also know that we have a lot to fix. And over the next 3 weeks, we're going to continue to focus on where California voters also want us to be, making life more affordable for them in their home, lowering the cost of electricity bills, lowering the cost of housing, making sure that we continue to invest in strong public schools and making our communities more wildfire safe. That is where I think that we can all come together as Californians to be able to move this great state forward. I'm incredibly appreciative of the senators in this room. If you take a look at bodies like this across the nation, across the world, debates like this can get physical. And we are so lucky to be able to live in a country where we can have these discussions and debates and go home still holding hands together on several issues that are in front of us. And I just want to say thank you to Leader Jones, to the Republican caucus, the Democratic caucus for their incredible work. I hope that you get some rest this weekend. We have a long 3 weeks. We're going to jam about 6 months into the next 3 weeks. So gear up, drink some coffee. The next floor session is scheduled for Monday, August 25th. Madam Majority Leader, and to our floor team, thank you so much as well for all of the hard work. We'll see you next Monday.
Thank you. The Senate is adjourned, in recess until 3:30, at which time adjournment motion will be made. We will reconvene Monday, August 25th, 2025 at 2 p.m.